A&B Properties is Quincy's largest apartment rental company with hundreds of units available. They offer short-term and long-term rentals with 1 up to 4 bedroom apartments. A&B Properties meets the needs of its tenants with care, compassion, and a quality of service that exceeds expectations. A&B Properties also has a convenient tenant app for you to do your payments or make repair requests. Give them a call today. A&B Properties, 217-919-8080, Quincy.
I feel pretty unprepared for this one. Like, usually I think a lot about the topic, but you was it yesterday you asked me to do this?
Oh, probably,
Yeah,
because
like
this we're doing this right before 4th of July.
Yeah.
This is the 4th of July Freedom Cast. The Liberty Pod.
Right.
All right.
I love,
yeah.
I love, and that's a big thing I think about kind of what you want to talk about is all of those like catchphrases, all those things that we're taught in school, no taxation without like all those things, I think that's a big part of this, a big part of like where we find ourselves today. I know you want to talk a little bit about the debate.
I do.
And maybe some of the stuff that kind of like led to the, the creation of this country, but today, it's a lot of talking points. And when we were in school, it was really boiled down to a very kind of generic concept of how this all unfolded, There was they were taxing us too much, and a group of plucky colonists, rose up against the greatest army in the world. And it's kind of vastly more complicated than that. But listen,
it is.
I digress.
It is. No, I mean, I like your intro. That's exactly the right way. So this is 4th of July, 2024. This is the Frankie Say episode number 675. No, I'm kidding. There hasn't been that many. My guest is Mike Shull. This is your third installment. You know why? Do you know why we bring you on?
No.
Because many times we need historical context.
All right. Yeah.
We need somebody truthful, trustworthy like yourself that has wisdom and knowledge. You're still the best looking teacher in Quincy.
Oh, man.
I know that's really
praise.
embarrassing,
Yeah,
but
well,
it's just, hey,
listen,
man, it sucks to be so awesome.
You got to say it. You got to call it how it is.
You got to call it how the way I feel about it. So, all right. So we are going to talk about the debate that just happened a couple of days ago, and then we're going to transition into some of the history and the founding of the country. Yeah. Happy 4th.
Yeah, and
Mike Shull.
Right, this is airing on the 4th, right?
Yeah, it'll air on the 3rd or the 4th.
The 3rd, okay.
Yeah, it'll be
close enough.
Bob will stick it on the 3rd or the 4th. Yeah.
Well, the 4th isn't really like the 4th, that was just sort of like the day that they agreed to kind of roll the whole thing out. But the actual Declaration of Independence had reached, King George. Prior to that, it had been done for a while, so it was just kind of a day that we're going to do it on Tuesday,
When do you think the founding fathers, the colonists, when do you think they really got mad? Really got mad and were like, okay, because this stuff doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, well, so I think that's all kind of, and this totally works in the modern context also, with the debate. None of it is really the way that it's portrayed. It's not like there was a consensus on revolution or staying loyal. It was very split. It's not like everybody was clamoring for revolution. It's kind of like today, with a lot of like wokeism is a good example of the squeakiest wheels get the grease. It's not like this. It's not like these people that are clamoring for this stuff represent the majority. They're just the loudest. And so most people are of the opinion that the Declaration of Independence wasn't for King George at all. It was for the rest of the colonists. It was sort of like crossing the Rubicon. It's like there's no going back. We've done this. We've committed to this. Because there was a big pull to get people on board, to get people to kind of commit to this idea of full separation. Because it wasn't popular. But I think you hear a lot about the spirit of 76, but really things really get going in 74. That's really when things start to reach a fever pitch. When we start to see unity in the colonies, we start to see, because there's the old saying that prior to 74, people used to say the United States, prior to the ratification of the Constitution, people said like the United States are. They saw the states as individuals. And if somebody prior to 74 said like my countrymen, like he's talking about other Virginians or other Carolinians. He's not talking about all the colonies together. They were separate entities. It'd be like how we view Canada. There was no unity. But so I guess my point is we like to think about like the modern era as being like under control, and like, oh, well, this is all being used against us with propaganda. But I mean, there's a lot of people that would sort of suggest that the Declaration of Independence was like the first major piece of American propaganda, or at least like, separatist, because we could go back, like the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, all of those had like big pieces of propaganda.
When was the Boston Tea Party?
Tea Party was December of 73. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying like really 74 was when it
really
started
when
to
things get going, and so the Tea Party really makes a lot of that possible because. So, like, I'll give you a little background on the thing. I know we were going to talk about the debate first.
But go ahead, because I want to know what they were so angry about.
So, like, with regards to the Tea Party, like, if we go back in time, like when the colonies start, there's a really great relationship going on between Great Britain and the colonies, and it's like anything else. Everybody's making money. Everything is good. So, like, Britain didn't really feel like they needed to have the colonies under their thumb or to be aggressively taxing them or anything like that because things were running smoothly and everybody was making a lot of money. And that was kind of the whole key thing. But then something's going to happen that's going to change that. And that's the 7 Years' War in Europe. And the American theater of that was the French and Indian War. And that's going to change things dramatically. In fact, a lot of people think that like George Washington is kind of the guy that ignites the French and Indian War. And this is all sort of part of it. He was a partner in this company called the Ohio Company. And the Ohio Company were land speculators, and they were buying up land in like the Ohio River Valley, essentially, with the idea that someday people are going to be moving out that direction and everybody's going to make a boatload of cash. Ben Franklin actually Washington inherited this from his brother Lawrence, who dies of tuberculosis. Him and Lawrence go to the Caribbean to try and like heal him with the air, like the same reason that like Doc Holliday goes to the American Southwest. He thinks like the climate's going to make his lungs better, and it doesn't. Washington gets smallpox there, which is going to serve him well later. Whether or not he survives the revolution without having previously been exposed to smallpox is anybody's guess. But so that's a very expensive thing. Oh, and by the way, when Washington is involved in this Ohio Company, he's also part of like this Virginia regimen of the British military, and he's sent as an envoy into the Ohio country to tell the French, like, you guys should go away. And they don't. But he gets into this conflict with this guy named Jumonville, who was like a French emissary, who was basically there to tell the British the same thing. Like, you should get out of here. This is ours. And like both sides in the French and Indian War, there are the French, and they've got Indian allies, and then they're the British, and they've got Indian allies. And they all have different alliances, and they all feel different ways about the people that they're involved with. Well, the guys that are with Washington, they don't like the French because they had bad experiences with the French. Like one of the head, guys, one of the head Indian scouts in Washington's encampment, his father was killed by a French guy. So while Washington is basically interrogating this Jumonville, his natives pull out their tomahawks and start just axing these guys to death before the Virginia regiment can do anything. And it creates a big international scandal. And I like this story because on his way back to Virginia, basically like the French just send him back to Virginia. They're like, this guy's an idiot. Send him back, and the Virginians can kind of deal with him. Britain can deal with him. And, they were all supposed to report on what happened. Well, when this happens, one of the things that Washington does is he, like, gets his story straight on the ride home and ends up turning this into, like drafts like a fake diary even about how things unfolded, right? and turns it into this, basically it was all the French's fault. And obviously the French are reporting the same thing. At the end of the day, the British are going to be the victors in the French and Indian War. And ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to basically bankrupt Britain. So now the days of, hey, everything's great and we don't need to have the colonists under our thumb is over. Now they need the colonists to repay this war debt. So that's when all of these, all the acts that you hear about, the Townsend Acts, all these, the Quartering Act, the Stamp Act, the Declaratory Act, like all these things come as a result of this. Where basically they're trying to recoup money from the colonists. And obviously the colonists don't like it. And this is when the colonists start to get organized. But so, long story short, there are British soldiers stationed in large amount in the colonies to basically enforce these things. And so, in 1770, the Boston Massacre happens, where basically like a group of Bostonians are, harassing a group of British soldiers, and they end up firing on them, and it turns into a whole big scandal. But the Boston Tea Party is a little different because there's like an economic element, I think, like involved in it. And so basically the story is, you've heard of the East India Company?
Yep.
So like the East India Company is like one of the largest companies that's ever existed. Like at its height, it has a military larger than the British military. It makes billions of dollars a year, and basically what they do is they went to India, they're exploiting it for natural resources, and they're shipping that stuff out all over the world, right? Eventually, they start to realize that like the East India Company is scary big and scary powerful, so Britain starts to try and get them back kind of under the fold. And so like it becomes a publicly traded company, and a lot of members of Parliament are stockholders in this company. And so now Britain as a whole has a major stake in the company, as it's called. So the East India Company originally, like, they passed this thing called the Tea Act, which basically says the British colonies can only buy British tea, because that way it'll help to recoup money. And it's like all taxed, and there's all these rules, like for instance, the company cannot sell the tea directly to the colonists. They have to send it to Britain. It goes to auction houses. British merchants purchase it, and then British merchants sell it to the colonies. And this is all just a means of like taxing it again and having it more firmly under their control. So, what eventually happens is, and then also there's this other factor to where if you actually want to buy tea in the colonies, you can buy smuggled tea for a lot cheaper because of the way that it all pans out, because of all the taxes that are on the tea. So you can buy Dutch tea, for instance, for a lot cheaper. And there are guys importing Dutch tea illegally into the colonies. A good example of a guy that's doing that is John Hancock, right? John Hancock is one of the biggest smugglers in all of the colonies. He's bringing tons of contraband in. And so, like, getting back to this kind of idea of, like, questioning the official narrative, like, we have to ask ourselves questions like, is John Hancock's involvement in the revolution self-interest? Another good example would be like the Proclamation of 1763. After the end of the French and Indian War, they say, well, the problem, the reason why we find ourselves in conflict with the French is that the British keep going into the Ohio country where the French are. So if we just stop them from going into the Ohio country, there will be no more conflict. Well, remember I mentioned the Ohio Company, who were land speculators, and they had bought all this land in Ohio. Well, that's not good for business. If now the land that we purchased in the Ohio country, we can do nothing with. Right, so like George Washington has a vested economic interest in the revolution, right? So long story short, the colonists are looking at this tea situation and they're like, this is nonsense. We shouldn't be forced into this monopoly. Like, we should have more freedom than this. So they start boycotting. They start boycotting the, I don't know if they can even hear that horn. I just look like an idiot looking over my shoulder. But so they start boycotting the British tea, right? So they'll buy tea from anybody else. Smuggled tea, whatever it is, okay? So this puts the company on the path to financial ruin, because now they've got warehouses full of tea. They can't offload it. Also, to make matters worse, in the years building up to this, in 72 and 73, there's famine in India in the specific part of India that the company is operating in. So all of their workers, all of their sepoys, which are like their hired guns, everybody is suffering from this. So they're already in the red. So Parliament says we got to do something. So what they do essentially is they say, look, you no longer have to ship the tea to Great Britain and sell it in warehouses or sell it at auctions. You can sell it directly to the colonists, but you have to sell it to like consignees, like people who are going to take it, colonists, companies who are going to take it, and they're going to sell it. They're going to push it to their fellow colonists. And they lift a lot of the tax, and so in lifting the tax, it brings it down to where it's basically just as expensive as the Dutch tea, right? It's like the same. So they cut out the smugglers. It's no longer profitable to do this. So in a lot of the colonies, basically what happens is the local rabble-rousers just get the consignees to resign. They're like, look, if you're an American, if you're a patriot, you shouldn't stand for this. Don't buy the British tea. But in Boston, in fact, Philadelphia, there's actually a Philadelphia Tea Party that nobody knows about. But all they do is they just turn the boat around. They're just like, go back to Britain. And so they sail away. But Governor Hutchinson, who is the governor of Massachusetts, has two sons who are the consignees that will be buying the tea in Boston. So this is like, a conflict of interest. Also, it's important to point out that one of the big things about the Townshend Acts, which are all the things that the colonists hated, all the acts that are passed after the War of 1812, after the end of what they call salutary neglect, meaning where we just left the colonies alone, but now we're not leaving them alone anymore. One of the big things that happens as a result of the Townshend Acts is before all of the judges, all of the governors, all of the officials were paid by the colonies. Now they're not anymore. Now they're paid directly by Britain, and they're paid with money raised from Townshend funds, right? So this puts them under the crown's thumb, essentially. So long story short, the colonists aren't, they don't want to stand for this. Boston, the shipment of tea, they're not backing down. And so the Sons of Liberty, who are like a local, I guess like political party, like they're not revolutionaries really yet. They haven't done all that much, although they are kind of creeping towards it. In 74, they're going to get super active and they're going to start like doing like, I guess what we would call like terrorism today. They're going to start like burning down houses and doing what they call like pull downs, where instead of like if your house won't burn because it's made of stone, they'll just pull your house down like brick by brick, like stone by stone. They'll just pull houses down. They tar and feather people, But so Sam Adams supposedly gives this big speech and he's basically like in front of the Sons of Liberty and he's like, look, there's no fixing this. And so supposedly, and this is like the official story, but a lot of people think that this was premeditated. They all get up and they all march down to the wharfs. Now, somewhere along the way, they all find Indian costumes, because by the time they get to the ship, they're all dressed up like natives, like Mohawk Indians, basically. So where they got those costumes along the way is anybody's guess, but this is kind of like the official story as told by relatives of Sam Adams. And they're very methodical. So they go and they dump what is essentially about 1.5 million British pounds, like the currency, like sterling, of tea into the harbor. They don't break anything. They don't hurt anyone. The lock that they have to break in order to get into the hold of the ship, they send a locksmith later that day to replace. So they're like very methodical in what they do and how they do it. But essentially the reaction from Britain is, we're going to close down the port of Boston until you replace all this tea, right? And this is like a watershed moment where the colonies start coming together. Because I remember, like, my countrymen are just my fellow members of my colony. But now all of these individual colonies start sending relief to Boston. They start helping. Like somebody in Connecticut, I think, like drives down a whole flock of sheep, like to help feed the Bostonians. It's also important to point out that Boston at this time, if you go to Boston today, half of Boston that exists today was water back during this time. There was only one way into Boston. It was this little bottleneck, and then it opened up into the city of Boston. But all around that was water. And starting in like the 1800s, they start filling that in, like literally pouring rubble into it so that they could build on it. So like a lot of Boston is built on what was previously water. So they were very reliant on the sea. If you're intending to just relieve Boston by importing stuff over land, it's going to be tough to do. So this gets everybody together. And so, the rest is, I think, we know where it goes from there. They start getting more organized. They start getting more heated. There still is like a 50-50 split, right? Like one of the things that they would do, and then, we can shift gears, but one of the things that they would do, that like these groups like the Sons of Liberty would do is like they would like show up at your house. Like, you work for Walter Lewis. They're like, hey, you're an important part of the community, like people know you. We want you to sign this piece of paper that says that you support separation. And you're like, I don't know if I want to go there.
There were separatists and loyalists.
Yes. I don't know if I want to go there yet because I'm afraid I don't want to alienate, part of my customers. And so they're like, oh yeah, I get it. No problem. We'll come back. So they come back the next time, and this time they're like, well, listen, you didn't sign last time. You didn't sign this time. Now your name is going to be printed in the paper tomorrow as someone that is disloyal, is essentially committing treason to this new thing that we're creating. So you are committing treason. We're not going to punish you until we're a country, but when we do, rest assured you will be punished. And then they might burn your business down or pull your house over or tar and feather you. So like, I hate to compare the founding fathers to wokeism, but like they were kind of the squeaky wheel. They were not a majority. They just got violent.
Well, it's kind of like you take a look at all of the really fun movies. So I take like, in real life, the separatists, the quote unquote, well, you said terrorism could be a thing. Back then they would resort to terrorism.
Well, that's what we would call it today, for sure.
But like so in Star Wars, like the Jedi. Yeah, they were the rebel rousers.
The rebels are always the cool kids,
right? And so in a lot of movies, the rebels are the good guys, but they could easily be looked at as the bad guys. For example, Karate Kid, Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I thought Cobra Kai were the bad guys, but then when that Cobra Kai TV series came out, like, wait a second, maybe Cobra Kai's okay.
You know what determines who is right and who is wrong, right?
The winners.
The
winners.
Well, look at how we view the American patriots. Look at how we view the American Confederacy. Point in case,
And and you know what? This goes even to present day, when you, and also in today, a lot of it is media.
Oh yeah.
I mean like legacy corporate media.
Yeah.
Not
a lot of it was back then. Today I think it's different. But like to put it in perspective, like after the Boston Massacre, for instance, like Sam Adams prints this really famous engraving because he was a silversmith, and an engraver. This very, very famous engraving that gets published all over the colonies that was called The Bloody Massacre. And it was like, it's like this group of redcoats and their commanding officer is like his eyes, like how kids draw like mad eyes, and he's pointing his sword and he's obviously saying fire and they're firing into this group of colonists and the colonists are all like, all very sort of like tragic. But really, it was exactly the opposite. These British troops were like, look, leave us alone. And they're throwing rocks and ice balls and, swearing at them. Somebody hits one of them with a club. So it's, propaganda goes way back.
So when talking about paradigm shifts, because some of this is what you've been talking about, is I'm sure at the time you've got separatists and loyalists. And each side will probably have some level of paradigm shift. What's your favorite definition of paradigm shift? Can I give you the story about how I learned what a paradigm shift was?
Yeah, sure.
So it's off the coast of Spain, and there's this in the water. It's a huge, huge storm. And this ship was trying to get back to port, trying to get back to Spain. And it was one of the worst storms that this ship captain had ever seen. And he's riding the waves. I mean, it's 30, 40, 50 foot waves. The water's coming across the bow, coming across the stern. He really didn't think he was going to make it back. His crew's freaking out.
Yeah.
He gets on the radio and he says, come in. I'm the captain of this ship. Where are you guys? I've lost, my compass isn't working. I'm heading into the wrong course, the wrong bearing. Please help me. And there's no answer at all. Then all of a sudden he sees a light coming right at him. And he gets really excited, and he gets back on the CB, and he says, hey, listen, I need you to get out of my way. I'm heading for this bearing. I have to get home. If you don't get out of my way, like, I'm going to crush you. And the voice comes back over the radio, I'm sorry, but we're not going to change our course. You're going to have to change yours. The sea captain's furious. He goes, how dare you? I'm ordering you as captain of this ship. I've served in the Spanish Navy. I'm sure I outrank you. I don't care what you say. Get out of my way. The answer comes back, I'm sorry, Captain. We know who you are. You're a very famous and profound captain, but I'm sorry, we're not going to get out of our way. The ship captain's furious. He goes, I'm telling you, I will put you in jail. Get out of my way right now. And the answer comes back, Captain, we're a lighthouse.
I thought that's where that was going. Yeah. Yeah.
So can I tell you something about what happened on Thursday with this debate?
Yeah.
It ties directly into kind of what you're talking about with how things kind of happen slowly. The way that world history happens. And I know that you're definitely an American history buff. And I know what you know so many things. I've noticed every time that I've seen things like how American government politics work. In the past few years, all of the data points that I've been witnessing, I've been called crazy. Other people around Quincy have been called maybe bad people. There's been times where, like, data points in the past 3 or 4 years, 5, 6 years, all of the data points make total sense after this last debate. Can I take you through it?
Yeah.
I believe that Americans at this point, they've been kind of taught to not trust their senses. Like, what they see, they get told, that's not what you're seeing.
Right.
That tape was edited.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
They'll be told, don't believe what you hear,
Yeah.
even though they're seeing the full video. Have you ever seen, like, when in legacy media, in corporate media, one thing I like about Muddy River is everybody just goes.
Isn't there a quote
everybody
by
goes
Orwell about that? Like in the final stages, like, they would make it so that you didn't even trust your own eyes. Like, you would see it happen, and then the powers that be would say, no, that's not what you saw. And everybody, I think it was Orwell.
So what happens is, I noticed, so people are so tied in to what they believe, and they've chosen their club. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like being a Bears fan. There are Bears fans, Chicago Bears, football.
Yeah.
There are Bears fans that they don't care how good or how bad the draft goes.
Right.
Go Bears.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be our year.
Yeah.
Cubs fans, eventually the Cubs did win the World Series.
I'm not a sports fan, so it's always seemed strange to me that you would just back this team, I guess, for 50 years, and it's not even the same. Like, there's not a single same person by the time you're all done, and what they are and how capable they are changes dramatically. They might change city, but like, still that's how we are. It's like tribalism.
I remember, I got to tell you something, and this is really scary for me to say. And I told my wife I was going to say it, and I hope that So in my middle 20s, I was dating this girl.
Oh, yeah.
And I cheated on her.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Not proud of it, but I cheated. Mm-hmm. And you know what happened, Mike?
What?
Anytime that she went out with her friends, I was really worried. I'm like, she's going to cheat on me.
Yeah.
And what I noticed about cheaters, what I learned about myself is, like, when you're cheating, you think the other person's cheating too. You project. So you're doing bad stuff. I was doing bad stuff. Cheated on her a couple times. I felt really bad about it. We had a terrible breakup. I was crying. I'm 25 years old. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I am sorry.
I'm sure that
to this day.
I'm sure that the relationship was struggling or something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, I was the bad guy.
Right.
And she's a nice girl. Yeah. Still to this day.
Yeah.
Married with 4 kids.
Oh,
beautiful.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She lives in.
God, does she know?
She lives in.
The cat out of the bag.
She
right
knows.
now?
She knows. Oh, no,
okay.
she knows.
Good.
I apologized.
Yeah.
When I was doing the cheating, when I was the bad guy,
Yeah.
I pointed the finger at her and said, "You're doing all of these things. This is what I think has happened."
Yeah.
And this is not a partisan thing. This is not a pro-Trump comment.
Sure.
President Biden has spent the last 50 years probably doing the best job he thought he could for the people of Delaware,
Yeah.
for the Senate.
Right.
I remember when I was a kid watching C-SPAN, and I saw a senator from Delaware, and he looked so regal. And I don't remember what particular committee he was on, but I thought to myself, he looks like he could be president someday. I really thought that as a kid.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of liked Joe Biden. So now, fast forward, that debate on Thursday night, what I've come to realize, all the data points of all the times that people have been told that, no, Putin's the bad guy. No, you got to get the shot. You got to get the COVID jab. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It'll get rid of transmission, or it'll reduce transmission if you get the jab. All the things that you hear. All of the people coming across the southern border, it's not that bad. Right. It's not a big deal. Every single time that we see things and we think to ourselves, that's not good. Yeah. In the past couple of years, everybody in the media has been saying, hey, listen, don't make fun of President Biden's stutter. He's an older man. Don't be ageist. Right. He's as sharp as a tack. Right. Everything's going to be fine. So you know what I learned on Thursday? This goes back to Boston Tea Party, American Revolution stuff. I'm not calling for revolution. Right. I'm just saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And what I'm seeing right now, it's the 4th of July right around the corner here. I'm seeing an old, frail man. Yeah. And I realized that there are all of these shadowy, unelected people running the show. Yeah. It is not him.
I don't actually think that even the people that support Biden really believe that he's not in cognitive decline, because you would have to be blind. You'd have to have no reasoning skills at all. If you watch, like you said on C-SPAN when you were a kid, if you watch that man speak, and you watch this man speak, I'm not saying that it's like a quantifiable thing, like it's definitely this or it's definitely that, but this guy's not as sharp as he was, and maybe Trump isn't either, and so it's like, I don't really see evidence of that, with Trump. I definitely see evidence of it with Biden.
Well, let me ask you this. Yeah. So when Reagan was finishing up the last 18 months of his presidency, he was in his second term. Yeah. And people close around him
have said that
they said that there were problems.
Alzheimer's.
Yeah, there were problems. And Reagan wasn't going to run again. Yeah. And there was a problem. And they could have made some changes, but they were able to squeak by. Yeah. It was towards the end of the Cold War.
This isn't about it's not about having a good president at this point. It's just about beating the other person. You know what I mean? Like both sides, I think they just want to beat the other side. I'm not a huge fan of either of them, but at the end of the day, I think like the Democrats have the obligation of picking at least someone better. Like it's so painfully obvious what's going on here that we're propping this guy up.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Yeah. So somebody's propping him up. Okay, I'm not going to claim to know who it is. I saw his wife after the debate saying, "Joe, you did such a good job. You answered all the questions, and here's your coloring book." But this is my big question for the people who are very much against Trump. There's a candidate named RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy Jr. Yeah. And so here's what the people who are in charge of Biden did. They didn't even give the Democrat primary voters a chance. This is not – so if you want to subvert democracy, this is the way you do it. We've got shadowy, unelected people running the show. We do not know who is in charge of our country. Right. So and I'm not going to say the pro-Trump thing where it says, well, at least Trump's given everybody the middle finger and fires everybody when he doesn't like them. But do you know, what's your opinion on why nobody's getting fired on the Biden side? Is it because the staff is actually running the ship and the staff, they're not going to fire themselves?
To be clear, just to I guess as a teacher, I like to stay pretty impartial in these sort of things. Like I don't ever really talk about my political beliefs in my classroom or anything like that. But I think it's important to kind of point out that this is not new. It's just more blatant than it ever has been. It's been going on forever. These sort of behind the scenes workings, people who are in bad physical health being propped up by their cabinet or even their wife in instances. So like none of this is a new thing. I think the thing that's appalling to me is just how blatant it is. Like we were talking a minute ago about that you keep seeing these clips of the Romney-Obama debate and how cordial it was. I happen to think that like that cordial nature is really important. I'll give you a good example. It just happened today. Mayla and I were driving down State Street, and we got to whatever that Duker and Howe or whatever that funeral home is right there, and they were just pulling out, so we pulled over. And I'm like explaining to her like why this is an important thing, right? It's, it lets them know that you're showing sympathy to the family, you're respecting the dead. It shows the community that we are here for each other. I think things like that, those ritualistic things are really important. And then, so when we abandon those things, I think that there are really detrimental side effects in those sort of subcontextual things that humans do, or some humans do. Not all humans do them. And when you get rid of them, it creates serious problems. Maybe not right away, but down the road. So yeah, like one of the things that I saw as being really problematic in the debate was Trump and Biden both would just make some claim. Oh, well, that group completely supports me. Every single one of them supports me. They hate this guy. And then the other guy would be like, no, they all support me. They hate this guy. There is no truth anymore. And I think we kind of touched on that earlier. There is no truth. You can say whatever you want. Everybody is so far down their own party and so in an echo chamber of the stuff that they listen to and they, absorb as a consumer, that there is no questioning it. The people that were Trump supporters are watching this and they're going, yep, they all support him. And the people that are the Biden supporters are doing the exact same thing. So I actually forgot what your original question was.
Well, people are locked into their clubs.
Yes. So more so than ever before, it feels like, the RFK thing. And so I feel like one of the reasons why RFK Jr. is so scary is he's not locked into a club. He's sort of like, well, I think this over here, and I like this over here, and, I would do this, but I also believe this. And so that's kind of terrifying because you've got this to the established parties, because you've got this guy who's sort of like not locked in, Like a good example with Trump is like I used to watch Trump on the Howard Stern show, 10 plus years ago. And he came across as an atheist. He came across as a pro-choice. He came across as being, pretty liberal in his sort of views.
Well, he was probably a Democrat at that time.
Yeah, but I feel like maybe when he started running, or getting this idea that he was going to become a politician, I think maybe he decided that, he was going to run on this concept of fiscal conservatism. And so he probably understood that there is no being a fiscal conservative that the Conservative Party is going to embrace without these other things. And so he sort of, sort of made that,
does fiscal conservatism actually exist by the masses in U.S. government today?
I don't think so. I mean, I happen to be of the belief that, what Trump started and then Biden finished with all of the COVID stuff landed us in this current, period of inflation that we find ourselves in. I think that you have to be blind to not understand that that's what's going on. Like if you go through a period of unbelievably unchecked spending and printing of money, that you're going to devalue your currency. Like the example that I always give is, imagine you just got engaged and you're admiring your new diamond ring, and then an asteroid made of diamonds blows up in the atmosphere and just showers the earth with fist-sized diamonds. As you're shoveling these diamonds off your driveway into the street, you are understanding inflation. You are understanding that your diamond ring is worthless, because you've just been inundated with all this new diamond. And so, which diamonds, interestingly enough, are not rare. It's like
They're not.
It's totally just a manufactured shortage Like the De Beers family just bought all the mines and closed them down.
De Beers has an almost unlimited supply, just holding on to them, and they release them whenever they see fit.
It's pretty
to
brilliant.
control the market.
So I don't think that it's possible to really be fiscally conservative at the federal level anymore. No, I don't. It seems impossible. It's like everything else. It seems like, these people run on all these ideas, and then, like day one, I always just have this vision that, like, you get sat down in a room with the head of the CIA, the head of the NSA, the head of the FBI, and they're like, all right, listen, this is how it really is.
So
this is what's really going on, and this is why you can't do any of this stuff.
So Obama said that.
Did he say it?
Yep, Obama said that. Trump said that.
That they basically just tell you.
It's like that Putin Tucker Carlson interview.
Yeah.
Where Putin said it too.
Yeah.
I mean, Putin is somebody who would know in terms of where he's been, and he kind of knows what his government's like.
Yeah.
And he's looking at his contemporaries in the United States government, and he goes, okay, that's a big, huge empire, and it's like that over there too. Okay, so the president, I mean, all three of those men that I just mentioned, this is what happens. I mean, Obama has literally said, you guys, I'm just the president. Okay, you get in there and you have all of these ideas, and you have your value system, and you have your moral compass.
Yeah.
Obama has said some pretty amazing things. I mean, some of his SOTU addresses have been mind blowing.
The power of oration is
his speech at the was it the 04 DNC is mind blowing. It's one of the greatest speeches of all time.
I was student teaching or getting ready to student teach at that point, and I remember them. It was at the Democratic convention where he gave that big speech.
He was the junior senator from Illinois, and it was 04, I think.
And I remember my cooperating teacher going, "That guy's going to be president. Like, just wait, that guy's going to be president."
Yeah,
and sure enough,
because it's if you read the transcript of it, but his delivery of it,
power of oration is.
But these guys, all these presidents have said, so you get in there, and you think you can make all of these changes, and it turns out that there's two things happening inside the United States government. When you're the executive branch, I mean, the executive branch, correct me if I'm wrong, is the president and his cabinet, right? And then you've got the judiciary is essentially the Supreme Court and the court system.
Yeah.
And then you've got the legislative branch, which is essentially
Congress.
Yeah. Obama, Trump have both said, you go in there and you think you're going to do all of this stuff. Yeah. You get sat down.
They're like, hold up.
And they say, because Trump made the joke, he goes, someone said, hey, President Trump, can you tell us about the aliens? And he goes, well, I can't tell you. And they're like, why? Because they wouldn't really tell me.
Yeah.
They wouldn't really tell me because they didn't.
It's a bananas thing.
And then Obama said regarding aliens, Obama goes, he jokingly said, he goes, I could tell you, but then I have to kill you.
Yeah,
he literally said that.
You think there's aliens?
Aliens?
Yeah.
Like what kind of aliens?
I don't know. Do you think that there's people from other planets that are visiting Earth?
So
do you think it's interdimensional? Do you think it's humans from the future?
Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
From what I know about the universe, which is it's 99.9% don't know.
Yeah.
But just that sliver of information I know about quantum mechanical theory, string theory, space-time continuum, the way gravity and time work in more of a spherical manner. It's not really that linear.
Right.
It seems to me, I don't know if it was Jimmy Swaggart or who said it. Somebody said, if it is just us, seems like an awful waste of space.
Yeah.
So
pretty vast.
Andromeda is one of the closest galaxies to us.
Yeah.
And I think I mean 100 million light years away. I mean, it would take 100 million light years. I mean, we can't accelerate there.
Or you just
we can't travel there.
Or you just,
Yeah, do the Larry Fishburne Event Horizon thing.
Just
where you just
a wrinkle in time.
Yeah, I do think there are extremely intelligent life forms in other places in the universe. I do think that.
Too.
But one of the things that I'm really starting to think is it's possible that maybe there's a life form here on Earth.
Yeah.
So this is going to sound stupid, but
no, it's not.
Maybe. So first, have you ever noticed that like the Navy, the Air Force, and they're always talking about when they're doing these test runs out over water. They see these things.
Yeah.
Well, either the United States has incredible technology and they're not sharing it.
Yeah.
Which
let me comment on that real quick.
Or
the conspirator, like people talk about a lot of conspiracy theories. Do you understand that, like, if we had access to that kind of unlimited energy and we're not sharing it with the public, do you know how many millions of lives are lost as a result of that? Like, do you know that we could end every problem facing humanity pretty much if we had that kind of unlimited power? So it is a big, people are always just like, oh yeah, the government probably has it and they're just not telling us. That would be some shit.
Have you heard have you heard the theory that not only has cancer already been cured, but they're not gonna do it. Okay.
Because it's the biggest.
There's this idea.
These are conspiracy theories that we're talking about, folks. By the way,
they're conspiracy theories.
You employ me and you're watching this.
But I'll tell you what, in 5 years they'll be true. So hey, just give it time.
I think AI has a strong possibility of solving a lot of earthly problems that haven't been solved.
Even so, if we came out with some type of technology that didn't require the burning of fossil fuels at all, the chain reaction of that would cause humans to start really hurting each other, probably. Probably, because everybody is dependent on that market. The energy market is so big. Well, the energy market, I don't know if humans are smart enough to transition to a futuristic alternative form of energy that's sustainable. I mean, we could. Why doesn't the United States allow more nuclear?
Right, because there's a fear surrounding it because of the few isolated instances where things have gone bad.
But it hasn't gone that bad at all.
I think
it hasn't been a big deal.
Yeah, no. I mean, in America, 3 Mile Island is about as bad as it got, and it wasn't even a thing.
That's not bad.
Chernobyl is the worst one. Fukushima was, whatever. Yeah,
it's not that bad.
Not that bad. I agree.
Not that bad at all.
I think that nuclear is a good option, for sure. I like the AI discussion for one big reason, and it's because if you think about someone that doesn't like socialism, like I think probably you and I both are not big fans of socialism. What's going to happen when AI legitimately starts to take all of the jobs and like 5 guys own all of it?
I mean, it goes back to the Andrew Yang thing.
Are we going to ask the government to get involved and take control of the means of production in order to give everyone a living wage?
Yeah, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And
that's what they're going to do.
Will former people with anti-socialist leanings be clamoring for that? I think maybe, I think maybe. I don't see another path forward because if all these jobs get taken up by AI, which I think is inevitable, even my job, there's going to come a point where I'm either going to be enslaved by the trillionaires that own this, or the government is going to have to intercede. They're going to have to get involved and take control of the means of production and just give everybody a living wage, And then you ever seen WALL-E? And then we turn into them. Like the fat humans.
I haven't seen that.
They all just ride around in like motorized wheelchairs with like big gulps, and they've got a screen in front of them. That's going to be us.
Yeah, that WALL-E, that little cute
I hope
robot
not, but yeah.
That makes the cute noises. Yeah. I've never seen that. But.
I don't know. We got way off on the AI thing, but...
one thing, what I want to do to kind of wrap up is just take what we've talked about and kind of wrap this up back into this 4th of July thing.
Right.
Because going back, I want to talk about the ratification, pretty much 1787, the ratification of the Constitution. Right. So take 5 minutes, because this is something that I've read, but I don't have a strong grasp on it. Take me through between the Declaration and the ratification. Or is that just too much?
Well, I mean, that's a ton. But I mean, I think like with regards to the Declaration of Independence, like there's a couple of big points that are kind of key to make. One is that it's almost entirely written by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is a slave owner. Oftentimes, Thomas Jefferson gets a lot of flack for including the phrase "all men are created equal" in the Declaration of Independence. I would make the argument that begins a watershed moment in the move towards the end of slavery and actual equality, even like male-female relations. I think it's kind of like a watershed moment Like, no one is really talking about abolition in the 18th century. You know, it's not until after the Constitution that people start to get actually realistic about this. It's not until after Thomas Jefferson says those words. Do you have any idea how ubiquitous slavery was in the 18th century? Like,
all over the world.
It is literally,
everywhere.
it is an unquestioned, completely normal part of life. Probably 1 in every 5 people that you know was at least an indentured servant, like, or at least their grandfather or great grandfather were. If you're a colonist. So, like, also, Jefferson is writing really influenced by, like, the ideals of the Enlightenment, which was like a brand new way of sort of viewing the world. Like, you know, the concept that, like, that a strong man, a king, a dictator should be in charge was a pretty, like, unquestioned part of the fabric of reality also. This idea that you know, we should put power in the hands of the people was pretty revolutionary also. I want to also point out that, like, a straight up democracy is not at all what the founding fathers were intending to put in place. I mean, it's still pretty elitist. They sort of saw themselves as the senators and the House of Lords. And if we're comparing it to Parliament, and they sort of saw the House of Representatives as being like sort of like the House of Commons. You know, it's way better to be a senator. You get paid more, you serve longer, you know, it's a better gig. There's fewer of you, right? Like, it's a way worse gig, you know. So they weren't putting in place this entirely egalitarian society. But I will say that, like, a lot of these ideas, these Enlightenment ideas, really do start to take off. And by the time the Constitution is getting ratified, people are asking questions about slavery. Like, for instance, the 3/5 compromise. Like, you know, in order to get the Constitution ratified, they knew that the southern states would not be on board if they got rid of slavery. So I think, like, you know, I think that we can see a lot of flaws in the founding of the country. But that's only because we're viewing it from this plateau. If we're looking down the mountain at what happened, it's very easy to go, oh my gosh, how primitive. But, like, this was the absolute most cutting edge thing that was happening politically and socially in the entire world.
Was it a flaw, or is it just not perfect? Because how can you make that perfect at that time?
Well, that's exactly it.
What could they have done to make it perfect?
Yeah, people want to say, they want to point out all of these flaws, but they're not seeing what was going on. And I'm not just talking about slavery. I'm talking about, like, the ideas of monarchy, for instance. I mean, you know, like, there were lots of guys, Hamilton, you know, who were, like, still kind of pro-monarchy. They wanted Washington to become basically a hereditary king. You know, they wanted to call him, you know, Your Highness. You know, he wanted Mr. President. Like, so there's this push and pull going on.
And Washington had to kind of push away from that.
For sure. Now, to put it in perspective, he was already, like, the coolest guy in the world.
Ever.
Yes. Like, he's not just a celebrity here. He's a celebrity all around the world in the 1790s.
Right.
And, like, is maybe at this point might be the richest man in the colonies. If not, he's close. He is the war hero, you know.
And
so it's like,
and the stories about him crossing
the Delaware,
the river during Christmas, and then
yeah.
all of these urban legends that
Yes.
are probably mostly true, but there's probably like some.
There's tons of like, I actually wrote my master's thesis for my education master's on revisionist history. So, like, and I do think that that's an important thing as we talk about all of this. Like, I'm not bashing on anything. I'm just talking about my own personal views. But at the same time, this has been going on forever. You're doing people a disservice by pretending that it's not. Like, people need to understand that, you know, sometimes the dog wags the tail and sometimes the tail wags the dog. Mm-hmm. More often it's that the tail wags the dog. You know, so yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like, you know, the Constitution, yeah, very important. Obviously, a lot of things get laid out. But, like, if we're looking at July 4th, man, Jefferson gets so much flack for setting into motion almost every modern liberal idea, you know? Like, this was revolutionary.
Classical liberal.
Yeah. But even like in the modern sense, like, he's setting forward, even though he didn't walk the walk, he's still setting into motion purposefully ideas about equality of all people, ideas that we should not be under the thumb of a tyrannical government, ideas that we, the people, the common people, should be making decisions about the direction which our country goes, and that if something should happen, that we no longer want to be under the control of that government, it is not just our right, but it's our duty to overthrow it. So
when were the Bill of Rights created? How far after the ratification of the Constitution?
Well, they had to be created. Yeah, in order to get everybody on board, they were being created behind the scenes before it all happens. But yeah, not long. Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
The 25th Amendment.
Yeah.
Should it be invoked at this time? 25th Amendment. Let's define the 25th Amendment.
Yeah.
Can you off the top of your head, or
Yeah. Just that if the president is not capable of doing his job, he should be replaced. Yeah.
that's generally what it is?
Yeah.
And if enough people it's either he's not capable of doing it, or everybody just pretty much disagrees. They look at the president and they go, you know what? This is bad. This is bad for us. If we keep this person in here, he has to be removed.
Yeah. The problem with that is like limiting the pay of Congress, or setting term limits, or making it illegal for them to insider trade is, it's them. It's the individual state governments that have to ratify all of this. So it's really tough to get done.
It's an interesting thing considering who would step into his place.
Yeah.
It'll also be interesting whichever political party is in charge, or whoever's in charge of figuring out who the next nominee or candidate is going to be for the Democratic Party, because I don't think Democrats. I don't think the people who are generally in charge of using democracy inside the constitutional republic to bring forth enough votes to get a nominee. I don't think they're going to use that process. I think they're just going to kind of just make it.
I'm still not certain that they're not going to use the debate to call into question whether or not, maybe not cognitive decline, but whether or not he's just got it in him, right? And that's another way of looking at this. Does he have it in him? And I thought for certain that they were going to replace him with Gavin Newsom. I've just thought that it was going to be Gavin Newsom from a year back.
There's another guy that when I first laid eyes on him and started hearing him speak, I'm like, that guy's going to be president too. I mean, there's certain people.
Oh, Newsom.
Gavin Newsom?
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
Oh, he will be the nominee at some point.
He's got the whole package going on, He's
well,
got the whole thing. No, I don't mean for what I want, but like he's got all the bits,
He's not a woman. He's not a POC, and he's not queer. So like, there's three huge problems, like things working against him here. No, I'm being dead serious. I'm not being facetious.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of sort of like.
Have you seen what the San Francisco mayoral race is going on right now?
No.
In San Francisco right now, and this is why I don't think Gavin is going to be an actual choice, because I think they have to go with all of their own rules. So those guys, like that side, they've got rules.
Right.
Rules like you have to have a certain kind of gender, you have to have a certain kind of
You're saying that in order to be the nominee, that you think that the Democrats would find it preferable if you checked one of these boxes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think at some point they're going to stop picking like straight old white guys. I think at some point in time that's going to change.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely part of the party values, is trying to be more inclusive and trying to get more people of color, more gender ideologies, a female president, to get them into that position to do exactly like what,
have you seen the San Francisco
they think
mayoral?
The Obama presidency did, which was sort of open things up. I don't know that it had that effect.
I mean,
I don't think that,
I'm guessing
I think that was the intent.
I'm guessing they'll put in Kamala, so then she will be the first president that hits.
You think she's going to be the candidate?
I think the best thing I think she'll be super pissed if they jump over her, and I think that they'll lose the black vote, if they jump over her. And I think they'll lose some of the women's vote if they jump over her. I think if I was in charge of the Democratic Party, I would give President Biden, who has served his time.
Yeah.
He served his country for 50 years. I'd give him a graceful exit.
Yeah.
I'd give the presidency to the current vice president, and then I whisper in her ear, say, hey, listen, here's who we've got slated.
Yeah.
We've got Gavin and Michelle. They're going to blow Trump out of the water. You have a 28% approval rating, Kamala. You can't win. We love you.
Yeah.
You're president now. You're in charge. Congratulations. You are the first
You think
female
Newsom
black
is the vice then?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, first of all, I don't think Gavin and Michelle are going to run together. I'm saying if Gavin and Michelle ran, or Michelle and Gavin, I think they're going to trounce Trump. I think they'll beat him within an inch of his life.
Yeah.
I think if you put like Oprah Winfrey and The Rock together, I think they beat the crap out of Trump too.
Yeah, they probably
listen,
would.
I'm being dead serious.
I agree with you.
Listen,
I don't disagree
it's
at all.
all about what legacy media, corporate media, and people hanging on to their BFFs and who they love to see. They don't want Orange Man Bad in the mean tweets. They want flowers and rainbows and bunny rabbits jumping around, and they like, well,
it is completely realistic.
Disney.
It is completely realistic to say that this is exactly the mindset of both parties. Both parties are taking this into consideration.
Yeah.
What boxes do we check? They have to. I mean, that's how you get someone in that office. To suggest, like, when you said that, I'm thinking to myself in the back of my head, I'm thinking, all right, like, who that employs me is watching this, and am I going to get in trouble? But at the same time, it's like, you'd have to be in complete denial of the way that the entire country works to think that this isn't the mindset of both parties. That they're not thinking about checking these boxes, that they're not thinking about, well, we got to get this guy in because he's this way, or we got to get this person in because they're that way. That's happening with Trump. He appeals in every way to the people that are voting for him. And that's happening with, whoever ends up being the nominee. Maybe it'll be Biden, maybe it won't, I don't know.
You going to buy some fireworks?
Yeah, I probably will. Yeah, break some laws.
Breaking the law.
It's a central thing to being an American, It goes all the way back, like the idea of bucking the system and, rebelling a little.
Well, let's go ahead and do that. Let's rebel a little. Let's try to keep it legal, even though fireworks are illegal in Illinois. Let's let's get some cheap bottle rockets. We'll shoot them off in Missouri. We'll drive the speed limit across the bridge.
Well, I live on the river, so I shoot them off and I try and get them over.
That's like halfway legal.
Yeah, halfway.
Hey, Mike Shull.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.